Cool, cool, cool. All right. The last few, fantastic. Cool. So a little bit, just, me, Brian Denker, co-founder of tackleid. Been doing stuff around marketplaces for quite a while. So kind of came back from services and around through software, and really as cloud marketplaces took off, we really saw it as a niche that we wanted to kind of dive into. And so really a unique kind of sector out there. This is going to be a little bit more business-based, a little bit more maybe even kind of sales and less developer, but it is really a revolution that is kind of taken stage, right? So marketplaces aren't really new to anything. If we look at kind of marketplaces from the beginning, Craigslist, one of the original marketplaces out here, right? Pulling tons and tons of things together so that you had a real easy place to search and find and look for different products. And it actually spawned tons and tons of products as well. You can see, there was some kind of cool stuff where people have literally taken every single category of Craigslist and looked, and shown that there's actually companies that have spun up about every single one of those, right? And it's a marketplace, and it aggregates sellers in one easy place to purchase. But it also simplifies buying, right? Kind of an interesting story when people ask me what I do, and I'm talking to somebody that's not in tech at all, and I say, well, 10 years ago, when you wanted to buy a pair of shoes, maybe Adidas shoes or something, you would actually head over to adidas.com, you'd look, you'd find your shoes, you'd look around, you'd see what is in there, and then you'd actually go and create an account, and you'd log in, and you'd put stuff in there, and you'd have to remember your password, and you'd buy your shoes, you'd pay your shipping, and you'd get it sent. And you actually thought that was a pretty good experience, because that's all there was at the time, right? Amazon came along, absolutely revolutionized the retail marketplace. And now what you do is you go to adidas.com, you find your shoes, you pick them, you look at it, and you say, great. And you go right over to Amazon, you buy them because you can click it, one click, it comes in 2 days. You don't have to remember a million passwords and all that stuff, right? And so that kind of behavior is a consumer experience that we're actually trying to drive, right? And so the way people are actually buying things in their consumer life is starting to drive more and more of how people actually buy things in their enterprise life, right? Younger people are coming up through these different executive roles. They're kind of used to buying things instant on, very consumer-driven culture, and they're kind of like, why does it have to be so hard for, why does it have to be so hard to buy this stuff in the enterprise? Why does it have to take months and months and negotiating and all this kind of work? Yes, the dollars are bigger, but conceptually, we're doing the same kind of thing, right? And so the cloud software marketplaces are really striving to kind of take a consumer-like experience into the enterprise transaction, right? And so they're trying to pull that in, like I said, like Apple, iTunes, Google Play, anything like we buy for our apps, right? And so when you compare that with what's actually changing, so we know IT spend is growing, we know things are expanding pretty quick, but when you look at, this is actually out of Forbes and there's in there, but when you look at where the spend is going, right? So $3 trillion of IT spend, that's nothing surprising, right? Lots and lots of money being spent there, right? But when you look at, of that $3 trillion, right, the cloud spend is 200, and change billion. But that's actually up, in the parentheses, up 40% year over year, right? And then when you take that one step further, which is the way people like to buy stuff, the consumer-driven as a service, I'm not buying perpetual stuff, I'm not installing servers, SaaS stuff is up even more at 117%, right? So this stuff is growing literally at 100%. And a common question I always get, because folks are always asking about marketplace, and the cloud providers are notoriously non-open about how much money is flowing through, right? They're public companies, and you can kind of disseminate it as you pull it through, and people have done that. But generally speaking, how much money flows through marketplace? I'd love to know, because they kind of don't believe it, right? They don't really think it's there. And so there is one article in security. Security is one of the fastest growing marketplace. It gets bought very close to hardware. And over $1 billion, 360-odd% growth just year over year in marketplace on security. So not only is that number, I think, pretty amazing in the growth, 300+% from last year to this year, but the fact that $1 billion of software has flown through in just the security market in AWS marketplace, right? Think of how wide that is when you add Azure, and then you add GCP, and then you add DevOps, and then you add business apps. Billions and billions and billions of dollars are being transacted right now today through the cloud marketplaces, right? And so if you're not there, Why are you, why aren't you? Is it hard? What is it? And we'll kind of get into a bit of that. But, those kind of things are changing, right? And you might kind of say, like, why is this happening? Like, what kind of things are driving that change? Because that's a pretty fundamental change in how things are acquired and how things are actually purchased, right? And so 4 or 5 kind of main keynotes here, right? Buyers are looking for like a single pane. Kind of go back to the Amazon, the retail marketplace, right? I mean, it's really taking that same role, the Craigslist idea, right? They're looking for a single place to purchase, so you don't have to go every single time to a different place. They're looking for consolidated spend. We all use credit cards because we want to have one place that categorizes all our spend. We go in and you want to be able to look at all the things you did in one spot. You want to be able to manage one big bill, budget for one bill, not budget for a million teeny little things, right? It's why we don't use checks anymore in checkbooks, because it's hard. It's like balancing your checkbook, right? Moving that. Software and hardware are commonly bought together too, right? Think about 10, 20 years ago, you would get a reseller and they'd sell you a bunch of EMC hardware, and then they would send you the backup software and they'd sell it to you in a big bundle. That made sense. One bill for all of this stuff together. Well, now you're not buying Dell EMC stuff as much anymore. Now you're buying your infrastructure on the cloud. So how come you have to go independently and sign MSAs and do all this other stuff to buy your software, right? The providers then, as they bring this in, there's a lot of incentives. So it's a pretty new market right now. Not a lot of people know about Marketplace, but as it kind of comes together, the providers themselves are putting a lot of incentives. And we'll talk about some of those incentives in a little while, but the concept of using my credits and using my enterprise agreements and using all these big budgeted dollar amounts to go buy software is very interesting, right? and then lastly, really what I was talking about before, the whole time to value is it gets the software into the hands of the developers much, much quicker, right? So simplifies the buying experience and gets it faster to value, right? It's a very edgy world out there in the speed, and you have to, you can't take a month or 2 or 3 to deploy a server and then go get software and then put it on it and then start your project 9 months later, right? You're just gonna get absolutely buried. So all of those changes and all of those behaviors and all of that stuff really created the software marketplaces. AWS was first and kind of moved in, and then GCP and Azure kind of followed, right? And so you'd think it would be really great. It's like, oh, this is fantastic. I'm just gonna switch over and I'm gonna start buying all my stuff through the cloud, right? And moving everything to the cloud sounds great, but it's really not that easy, right? Take a typical enterprise 1,000 company, and this actually came from AWS themselves, but I mean, thousands of applications, right? Thousands of applications, 50 to 60% in-house developed applications. You got to rewrite all those things. Like moving to the cloud and the tier 1 services, that they have available is great, but it's got to be a mix of multi-cloud, multi-product, third party, right? The Apple App Store was really interesting at first because it brought everything together and you could deploy things. When you went to the next step, what made the Apple App Store really interesting is when they opened it up to third-party applications, right? All of a sudden, third-party applications entered in there, and it became even more valuable. And so cloud providers have realized that that is a key piece to actually bringing people onto their platform and keeping them there, right? Just very similar to the consumer, just like Apple, just like Google, right? And so, in GCP, the average, you go out there and you search for just tier 1 services, there's like 100 of them, right? That's a lot of services for them to support. It's a ton, right? Everything from querying to database to DevOps to, code repositories. They have all that stuff, but they realize that they have to go get and have the third-party software as well, right? So the GCP marketplace, which is, arguably the least mature of the software marketplaces, has almost 2,500 products, even though there's only 100 tier 1 services, right? So it's already, pretty impressive how fast they're kind of capturing that stuff. So what does this mean for buyers and sellers, right? So let me kind of just rewind back here a little bit. It kind of talks through a little bit of why marketplaces expanded and where they went, right? And so Amazon built their entire model on, I want to buy a server for an hour. I want to buy for a month, I want to rent a product, and I want to do this. It was all very quick to deploy. It was all very simple, right? And so the first, marketplace, or AWS put out the first marketplace 2012. It was very quick to deploy. It was like, I want to buy Tableau for a month. I want to buy something for an hour. I want to use it. That's really great for buyers because there's no commitment. It's very consumption-based. It's very easy. It's really not that great for sellers because now you have no run rate of revenue. You actually don't know what you can forecast because somebody could just quit and bail and let go of the software, and you don't really know what it is. And so 2012, AWS came out. 2016-ish, Azure and GCP came out. So they were legitimately 4 years behind just in the marketplace itself. And then right around 2016, big fundamental change happened, and AWS released what they call the SaaS marketplace, right? Sounds pretty simple. We're going to sell software as a service on the marketplace instead of a deployable application, right? What that did, software as a service is generally not a consumable by the hour product. It is generally something you would buy with a contract over a course of a month or a year or more. And so all of a sudden, the idea of being able to sell a product or service on the marketplace for a 1-year upfront paid contract instead of just an hour, now the sellers started to say, that's actually really pretty interesting, right? And so the movement from the click to deploy over into the enterprise fulfillment model made a huge change. And so that was 2016, and that actually, if we rewind a little bit, that's where myself and my co-founder decided or kind of saw this change, and we said, wow, this is going from small dollars that are going to happen in the marketplace to massive deals, right? Because now somebody's going to be able to sell a 3-year contract for a multi-million-dollar product, and they're actually going to be able to transact that through a cloud marketplace and put that on their cloud bill. That's super different than I want to go buy 5 users of a product for a day or a week or a month, right? Massively different. And so it's actually kind of funny. When Tackle got started, we originally said, hey, we're going to go, right before we did it, we said, we're going to go list a bunch of products and we're going to charge like 10 cents an hour. And that's actually what we did. We listed MongoDB, Ubuntu, a bunch of open source products. We charged like 10 cents an hour and kind of started getting little couple $1,000s a month in. We thought it was great. And then it kind of quickly became a little bit of a race to zero. Somebody else is like, well, they're selling that for 10 cents. I'm going to sell it for 8 cents. I'm going to sell it for 5 cents. A lot of people didn't necessarily even have the capability to sell hourly. And so we looked at the expand market. We looked at all that, and we said, man, this is going to be really hard to make a business because the revenue is actually going down instead of up. And what we realized through that process, though, is that listing on the marketplace managing is kind of tricky. We'll talk about that. And so what we did is we kind of flipped the script and said, well, what if we just helped folks list on the marketplace, help them sell on the marketplace, and then manage that, and then help them provide enterprise fulfillment through the entire system. And so that, just kind of a little bit of a timeline there. 2016 was a huge year, massive change in the marketplace, and AWS leaned in really hard. Google and Azure were a little slow to adopt that. They weren't sure it was really what they wanted to do. They didn't know how to run the system. They actually didn't have the billing set up to do so. So it literally took until essentially the first quarter of 2019, last quarter of 2018. So almost 2 or 3 quarters ago, they just released the SaaS marketplaces, right? So now here we are, Q4, Q3 of 2019, and all 3 have fulfillment, enterprise fulfillment marketplaces, and it's starting to pick up a bunch of steam, right? And so you can see how it's starting to kind of balance between the two, right? And so what are some of the specific things, right? So if I'm a buyer or I'm a seller, you're trying to create software, you're trying to do things, right? So if you're a buyer, a financial services or somebody out here, you need to get the purchased software that you're spending money into the hands of your developers faster. You can't afford to wait for license keys to be deployed, for things to be sent, to things to be pushed out. That kind of stuff takes forever. So the marketplace allows that to happen immediately, right? Secondly, this is some of the stuff we talked before, you want to actually consolidate your purchase, right? You want to actually speed these things up, right? And as a buyer, it's like, I want to be able to buy this together, all in the same. You want to leverage, you're signing up an enterprise agreement with Google or Azure. You'd love to use those credits that you might have to buy software. Wouldn't that be great? The ISV gets paid, and then the credits offset the bill. Like, everybody wins, right? And the cloud provider who's providing the credits actually, wins because now you're building on their product, right? And you're buying it through. So it's like everybody wins in that process. And then lastly, the procurement process, right? The idea of selling software these days is really hard. It's slow, it's archaic, it hasn't changed in 20 years. You negotiate MSAs, you gotta get a PO, you gotta work through that whole entire process. With the marketplace, it's literally one click. You literally, you go in, click to subscribe, you might have a private offer or a public offer, you can click, boom, goes right to your bill, you don't need a PO. It's kind of crazy. I'm just like, wow, I'm gonna buy $100,000 of software and I don't need a PO, right? It's gonna land right in the bill. And you can move through, like, if I agree to the terms that are public, that are out there, and a lot of the companies have standardized terms that are public and you can essentially pre-agree to. They're pretty well balanced. You can just purchase it without having to negotiate MSAs. So, it really reduces the speed in which you can get software and get time to value for those works. From a seller, if you're an ISV, say you're Morgan Stanley or FinServ and the buyer, those things are just helpful. Similar, of the same kind of side for a seller. So you're an ISV, you're Cockroach Labs, and you're kind of looking, man, I'd really love to sell this to a large enterprise, right? It shortens the sales cycle because the procurement is totally minimized. It allows Cockroach to get into the hands of the developer so you can start developing quicker. It also allows you to co-sell with the cloud provider. So if GCP or Azure is in that large account and you're trying to sell to them, you can leverage that person to sell. It's like, hey, I'm gonna put it on your marketplace, you're gonna get comped, I'm gonna get comped, we're all gonna win. Can you introduce me to the procurement? Can we move this faster? Can we get this approved, right? And then lastly is being able to not only co-sell with the providers, but leverage the enterprise agreement. Going back to, AWS again built their model on, renting things for an hour. It's kind of humorous to now look into that because they've kind of flipped, although that's what they do and that kind of evens out over time when you have a big enough run rate and a big enough pool of customers. But really, if you know anything about the enterprise reps that are out selling right now, they're out selling and they're selling enterprise discount programs, EDPs. They're selling enterprise agreements. They're selling these massive programs of like 100 million over 5 years, right? And so somebody's going through the process to get this huge budget and now they want to go spend it. So if you get, it's kind of like if you get a $50 card from your company to go ride the subway, it's great. You're going to use that. You're going to ride the subway. It's like fantastic. I already got it budgeted. It's all good. If you forget that card and then you got to go pay and you got to pay outside of it, it's super annoying, right? It's like, ugh, now I got to go spend $3 even though I already prepaid for my $50. And that's kind of what's happening in the big companies, right? You've got hordes and hordes of really aggressive cloud sales folks creating enterprise agreements with all these massive Fortune 1000 companies, right? So they've got this pre-built budget, and now you're trying to sell your product in there, and you're trying to go direct. And you're going around, and now they got to go find different budget outside of it. So the ability to tap into the budgets of the enterprise agreements is huge, and be able to put it on that bill. So an interesting take on that, I think, is tackleid ourselves, right? And so we like to kind of say we are our own best use case. When we started the company, we did our first 6 deals, first 6 customers. We did them direct. They were super hard. We were a 3 or 4 person company, and we were trying to negotiate with huge companies, CyberArk and McAfee, and we were trying to get in there, and they were trying to buy our product for, whatever cost. And I was like, man, this is hard, like trying to get through procurement and stuff. It was just so challenging. And so ever since those first 4 or 5, we're like, hey, we are a marketplace company. We help companies succeed in the marketplace. Why don't we sell our stuff on the marketplace? And so ever since that, kind of that first couple quarters when we did those first deals direct, every deal we do through the marketplace. So you could go out to, right now, you can go out to AWS, you can go out to Azure, you can go to GCP, search for tackleid, you can see us, our pricing's out there, our description, you can literally buy us right there. And if you buy us, then that initiates the process for us to go get you listed on the marketplace, right? And so we are our own best use case in this, and what has it really done, right? So we were able to leverage the idea of the marketplace to build our product. We started in 2016, and we had 6 customers in our full MVP within 2 or 3 quarters later, which was super fast, right? We leverage a bunch of tier 1 services from AWS, which is cool, but we couldn't get by with everything, right? So we also purchased GitHub, Auth0, Circle CI, ACOG Guru for training. Like, these are real things that we purchased on the marketplace for our teams, right? So we integrate all that together. Some tier 1 services when it makes sense, third-party products when it doesn't. We purchase them all through the marketplace. It's all on our one bill, and we get a lot of credits from AWS because we spin the dials. Those credits go and count against all of that stuff too, right? So it's just kind of like like, hey, this is a really great way to build software, and this is a really great way to develop stuff. Now, sellers, like we've got a 3 or 4 person sales team. It's fantastic. So they're out selling. They can now sell Tackle because we sell in the marketplace, like I just said. Because we sell, we can sell generally in a sub 30-day cycle, right? It gets in there, people like it. As soon as they decide they want to purchase it, it's a matter of like a couple conversations, and they log into their account and they can buy it, right? So it's a completely cost-effective channel where we can co-sell with a lot of these cloud reps and actually get things done. And then we leverage the same thing where large ISVs, so we talk about like the FinServ and the Morgan Stanleys having EDPs, of course, for $100 million. Well, you go to any of these massive built for the cloud companies, and they're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars a month as well. So they've got an EDP the same way. And so you can actually, we sell to ISVs, and we sell to ISVs and leverage their EDP so they can buy us, right? And they can buy it faster. So they get, some chunk of credits from the cloud provider, and then they leverage their current budget, and they can buy it, and they get in the marketplace in a matter of a couple weeks, right? So it's really an amazing experience. And what has it really done? You kind of say like, wow, that's cool. You've been in business for a couple years, right? What has it actually done? And we can say like right now we have over 80 customers. We have some huge, we have some little. Kind of cool things to point out. Companies like GitHub, massive public company, just got bought by Microsoft for 57x earnings or something like that. We have them listed with their SaaS product and their enterprise product on the marketplace, right? Because they've realized it's too hard to deal with. Hey, we're going to have somebody like Tackle take it over. We also got companies like Yotascale and some of these other little small companies who 10, 12 people, they've decided their entire go-to-market is going to be through the marketplaces. They don't want to deal with debt collection. They don't want to deal with debt risk. They don't want to deal with, the contracting issues, and so their entire go-to-market is through marketplaces, right? So they're aligning with all three and pushing all their information there, right? And so you kind of say like, wow, that's a lot, huge spread of customers all over the map. Even a humorous one, right? Looker just got bought by Google a couple months ago for $2.5 billion or something like that. They literally got bought by Google, and with it, about a month later, they came and paid us to list them on the Google marketplace, right? It seems crazy, right? But it's because it's like something they don't know how to do. It's like, I don't know, we're Looker. We're like a BI tool. We don't know how to go integrate with the marketplace. So they actually bought us, right? So there's just a ton of stories there on how that works, right? And so just kind of a little plug. This is our VP of Sales, Don Addington, but he posted this. He was over in Europe this week at SaaS Stock, and he posted this, so we went over, and I think it's kind of cool, right? Just this year alone, 10x the revenue, 5 times our year-over-year customer count, and 4 times our year-over-year head count. Company's growing, people are doing it, and it's literally all we're doing is providing the conduit that lets people transact where they want to transact, right? Pretty cool stuff, pretty interesting, right? So at this point, you kind of look at it and you say like, that's cool, marketplaces are great, right? Like, why are we not there if you're not? Well, they're hard, they change fast, they're quick, right? And it essentially ends up as like a full-time job for folks. If you're an ISV and you kind of log on, you say like, hey, I'm going to get in the marketplace. You go to AWS, you go to Google, what have you. They're not going to do it for you. They're not going to walk you through step by step. They're going to essentially hand you a PDF of hundreds of pages. These are the page counts as of right now for the 3 main cloud providers, right? They're going to say, here you go. Here's your 603-page Azure Marketplace guide. Have at it. Start logging on the API, start doing things. And it's truly like an exhaustive process. There's not a lot of support. The good news and the bad news is that we are in a super front cutting edge market. There's no real competitors for what Tackle's doing to help folks sell on the marketplace and get listed. But in the same respect, there's not a lot of knowledge either. There's not a lot of knowledge bases. There's not a lot of information out there. And it's just legitimately hard and tricky to do, right? So it's tricky. So, it's like we all kind of said, there's a few little plugs here for some of these companies and such, but the hard way or the easy way. This is just a snapshot of like what the AWS procurement process or integration process, the integration process is for AWS, right? You have about 7 or so APIs you have to connect, receive, pass the token back, validate it, then register the user, find out who they are, get the entitlements of what they bought, send it back that you approve the entitlements, and then notify your customer team and move on for provisioning, right? So those are all those integrations that you've got to build. Those integrations don't do anything for your customers, right? It's not part of your product. It's indistinguishable engineering. It's kind of like CRM or finance. Like you have to have that as a company, but it's not doing anything to actually pleasure your customers and make them happier, right? So what we say, like the hard way or the easy way, right? Tackle's middleware, Tackle.io takes care of all that stuff and allows you to just plug straight in. So there's zero engineering work to get on the marketplace with our middleware, right? Because this stuff is so cutting edge and because it's so new, they're changing a lot, right? Things are constantly changing, moving around. This is a real live story of New Year's Eve. I don't know why someone was approved, but they changed the Get Entitlements API on New Year's Eve last year. And they changed a couple of the parameters you send. So any purchase that went through after New Year's Eve, and they didn't even notify people. It was actually kind of a mistake of sorts then when they pulled it back. But they kind of went through there and we noticed it right away. We have over 100 listings under management and all these, and we were like, whoa, things started not working. Boom, we put the fix in. Obviously, all of our customers were fine, but it took us a couple days. But it literally happened on New Year's Eve, right? And when we went back to AWS and kind of described what was going on, they just couldn't, they were like, oh my God, everybody's integrations broke. We had to go back and notify everybody. And even after they notified everybody, then they had to go re-engineer the fix for that code. And it's just kind of like dealing with that it's just hard, right? It's just hard to kind of manage that stuff, and that's what we kind of try and do. But lo and behold, if you actually do get that stuff working, either through us or yourself, and it's great, it's a really different model here. So these are the under the covers bit, right? Think about it. You're selling your product on a marketplace. Someone is subscribing to it. So we've actually had folks tell us, okay, so where do I send the invoice? It's like, well, you don't send an invoice, right? What do you mean I don't send an invoice? Well, they bought it on AWS. As soon as they pay their AWS bill, you're going to get a deposit. They're like, what do you mean I'm going to get a deposit? It's like, yeah, they're just going to put money right into your account, which is great because it reduces debt risk. So here we are, a small company, selling to 80 plus customers. We haven't had one loss of collection, right? It's all collected within 60 days. It all gets paid, gets deposited on our account. Because who's not going to pay their Azure bill, right? They shut down the entire thing. It's a line item. Who doesn't pay their AWS bill? They pay all that stuff, right? And so debt collection, all that kind of stuff. But it's different. The finance teams have to change. They're not going to send invoices. They're going to get things sent directly into their bank account. They're going to have to reconcile it. They're going to have to do this. So what we did is we kind of built the other side of our platform, which actually pulls in Downstream, which pulls in all of your sales. It pulls in what you sold across all clouds. Imagine that, like everybody has different reports. Azure has different reports, GCP has different reports, and AWS has different reports, right? So we are able to pull all that stuff so that you have one area where you can actually see all your reports, right? So kind of interesting stuff. So I'm kind of in here. You got about 7 or 8 minutes left, but so I'll finish kind of a little story and shut this whole kind of thing down. But if you think about cloud infrastructure, right? It was started in the early 2000s. It took about a decade to get going. You still have people talking and saying it's crazy and it's not secure. But it took about a decade to be mainstream. Now, honestly, any Fortune 1000 company has at least a cloud strategy, and almost all of them have a multi-cloud strategy, right? They all are there. And so it's kind of like, think about that timeline, right? Modern marketplaces have been around 7 years, 2012. They've really been around about 5. So literally, it's just a matter of time before this is moving on, right? And I end with a little bit of a tagline of, most companies, I'll get there, I'll do it, I haven't had time, it's something I'm working on. And it's not going to be important to you until it is. Until you're in a sales cycle, you're under the gun, you want to get something in this quarter, and they go, dude, if I can buy it on Marketplace, I'm in right now. And otherwise, you're like, well, we're not there. Now I got to develop it. So my last thing is just kind of end in a story. It's kind of funny. So I was a competitive sailor. This is actually me sailing here on my boat, actually, in the background. But there was a huge sail technology that came out in the late 90s called a laminate sail with Kevlar, right? Before that, everybody had fabric sails, and they thought that was it. And that was the way you did it. And that was the way you did everything, right? And so my skipper, who's a pretty forward-thinking skipper, was like, hey, I'm going to buy one of these new laminate sails with the Kevlar. That's really cool. And he kind of got mocked by a bunch of his other competitors, and they went around. And it was hilarious. Here we are, and I was sitting there as a young, 25-year-old kid listening to the argument between the two, $1 million skippers and arguing, and my skipper just said, hey man, that's totally cool. Like if you don't really, if you don't want to, accept that, or you think cloth is the way to go and Dacron is the way to go, and then that's fantastic. But I'll just see you around the mark. And it was literally within 18 months, everybody had the Mylar sales, right? Completely changed. So it's like, instead of trying to be a follower, think of where it's actually going and look at the way the trends are. So it's just, something to really kind of look at and something kind of new and people aren't paying attention to. So with that, that's it. Questions, comments?
Anybody with questions? Yeah. Hold on. I can hardly see you through this maze of people and stuff.
Thanks, Brian. Good conversation. If for an ISV provider that's not ready to transact, do you have to modify your product itself, or is there a way you can transact through Marketplace and still retain what you have?
Yeah, right. So the old click-to-deploy marketplace, you had to actually modify it, and that was one of the huge challenges, right? Actually changing and updating your product and building software into your product to make that happen, right? But that was kind of, I was saying, in 2016, 2017, with the advent of the SaaS kind of enterprise fulfillment rather than click-to-deploy, that completely changed how that works, right? So the ability, we get that comment a lot. Most companies say like, hey man, I don't have click-to-deploy software. It's just, I need to have services and I need to wrap stuff around it. And those are the kind of things that happen. And so the last couple of years have made a massive change. So to answer your question, no, you do not have to have click-to-deploy, and you don't have to build software on your side to actually leverage the marketplace these days.
Cool.
Good.
All right, buddy. Thank you so much, Brian.
Awesome.
Thanks, buddy. Yeah. So.